All right. Is this game good? Let's start right off the bat with no spoilers.
No spoils.
Do you recommend people buy this? Let's get a bit more specific. What kind of person should get this game?
What kind of person
Yeah.
should get this game?
I mean,
Well,
people
see,
who like BioShock, System Shock, Half-Life.
it's weird because Prey is just different parts of popular games kind of smashed together. So in a way, it's a game that you've already played, but at the same time, it's its own thing. And it's hard to recommend. Like my buddy called me earlier and said, "Hey, is
Greg?
Prey a good game?" Yeah, Greg. And he called me up and he said, "Is Prey a good game?" And I was like, "You shouldn't play it." But that's because I know how that person specifically plays. The thing that's important to note about Prey.
Who's this? Tell us about your buddy. What about him makes you not recommend it to him?
He likes games that are more linear. He likes games that tell you how to complete objectives. He likes challenges, but at the same time, he
Are
doesn't
you
like
actually
anything.
talking about yourself, or this is one of those
No.
I'm asking for a friend thing?
No. I swear, I promise.
Okay, so linear people might not go for this?
It's a game that is easy to get lost in, and it's a game that's easy to kind of lose place of what you're doing. And that is why specifically for him, I thought it wouldn't be good for him. But it's because it's weird. It's very BioShocky. The story is basically BioShock, but in the sky, not in the sky, in space.
BioShock
They already did
Infinite?
that. Right? Yeah. No. It's a spaceship, a big old space station. Something's gone wrong on it. You have a hand in it, but you have amnesia. A lot of the game is about the mystery of the space station, so I want to be very vague on story. But the cool thing about the game, though, right from the get-go, is you can play as a man or a woman, which is awesome. It's really good. I like when games do that because it's important to recognize the female sex as gamers. So when you can have an entire game where you play as them and it doesn't really matter story-wise, that was really cool. But yeah, this game is good for people who like BioShock for the narrative, first and foremost, because it's very BioShocky. But on the I can't talk today. On the constituency that you also like games like Deus Ex and Dishonored.
Okay.
Because this game is like a sum of those three parts. It is BioShock in its narrative tone and some of its gameplay elements. Like you use a wrench, use vending machines to make ammo and stuff like that. So there's a lot of BioShocky stuff in there.
Do you have the plasmid type powers?
Yes, you do. But instead of like individual things that you inject in yourself and it gives you a power,
Right.
you have 6 different skill trees. 3 of those are human skill trees, and it's normal things like make weapons get better, run and jump faster. And then you have Typhon skill trees, which are pretty much mutagens. So they let you do things crazy cool, like you can turn into an object and hide. Some of them are like basically spells, like throw out an electric field, a kinetic field, a fire field, stuff like that.
Can you combo them like in BioShock?
You can, but it's kind of left up to you. So one of my favorite things to do is I run in, and if it's a big enemy, I'll slow down time, and then I'll throw out 2 kinetic fields, and then use a mind power that can hurt another. Because there's like robots in the game. There's also, I guess, biological organisms, if you want to call them that. So
Okay.
I'll use like the biological one to really, really hurt the big guy, and then I'll switch into like firearms and stuff. So it's not so much of like you do this and then this and this. It's kind of finding your own play style within it. But at the same point, the game is kind of confused of whether or not it wants to be a thriller game where the enemies are really, really tough, because they are really tough, or a game where you're supposed to shoot at them, because oftentimes there's more enemies than you can really dodge. So the combat can be kind of dull. I mean, it's not the focus of the game. But
Really?
the fact is you can really approach it. Yeah, I think the focus of the game is more about exploring the space station. Like I said, there's stuff that's like Deus Ex, and a lot of it feels exactly like Deus Ex. If you never played Deus Ex Human Revolution or any of the older ones or the new one for Xbox One and PS4, the idea of that game is that it gives you an objective, but you can go about it any kind of way you want, whether stealthily, brute force, and then all the different upgrade trees kind of allow you to have different playstyles. And that's what Prey is. So one of the first objectives in the game is like, go through this door, okay? And you need a key card. So immediately you have the option of either A, do I go and find the body with the key card? Do I B, look for another way in? Or C, hack around it? So there's already 3 options in the first. And then as objectives get more complex, it gets more and more, the options get more and more varied. So it's a game about exploration, finding your own play style, stuff like that, before it's a first-person shooter.
So sort of like Deus Ex, multiple access points, exploration mixed with a bit more of how much horror is in this game? Are there less jump scares, or is it more of an
That's
impending sense of dread?
that's the thing. It starts off very much the intro to this game, and I'm not going to spoil any of it. I just need you guys to know the intro to this game is awesome. It's one of the best, most strongest introduction first hours that I've seen in a very long time. But that's a big part of the story as well. As it's not scary enough to be a horror game, but it's not actiony enough to be a first-person shooter. The game starts off kind of ominous because the idea is, you're on this big space station and there's some sort of organism that's messing everything up. And the enemies are cool because some of them, they're mimics. They can mimic into things. And in that situation, yeah, if you're just exploring, you come into a new room, you're exploring it, and all of a sudden a coffee cup turns into an enemy.
Okay.
It can be jump scary, but that's about the most you're going to get. The game itself, it's not like the narrative revolves around like, oh, I'm going to come around this corner and all of a sudden a big monster's going to grab me. It's more like the monsters are just there to be ominous and difficult. It's not. Yeah, it doesn't scare me. And I play a lot of horror games, so that's maybe a wrong judgment to make for everybody. But I would say if I'm looking at it objectively, it's simply not scary enough to be considered a survival horror game.
Sure.
It's not. It has a lot of tropes like survival horror games, and as far as like having to heal yourself and conserve your ammo, but it doesn't present itself like a scary game.
Is the healing any type of auto regeneration, or is it strictly with medkits and
You
crafting?
You can get some stuff that like some skills that might reduce damage or shield you, and sometimes like small bits of health. But a lot of the health comes from crafting med kits that you use by deconstructing materials and crafting them into new things, or finding food and stuff in the environment that you eat, much like BioShock or Deus Ex.
So when you're dealing with the enemies in this, is it like, well, what's the percentage of times that you're trying to avoid them, or are you dealing with them? Are they sort of like big daddies in the way that they're these big epic encounters? Is there a mix? Are there lots of smaller little ones that you're sort of kind of plowing your way through?
It's weird because the game almost kind of has four major kind of enemies. Really small mimics, those are the things that pop out of the environment. Things called phantoms, which are kind of like, human-sized things that can use special attacks. You have these kind of behemoth-looking things that are they're technopaths, kind of like imagine the big floating eyes from Doom, but more spacey. There's those, and then there's some other bigger enemies. But for the most part, they're kind of just there's human enemies, there's big enemies, and there's small enemies. So there's a good variety, but it kind of ramps up as you go. It's the enemy selection is good, but I guess the enemies they're not even a focus in the first place. It's weird.
So it's more about the exploration and the lore, and is it narrative driven in that way then?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying. It feels like BioShock first and foremost because it's so driving with the narrative.
Right.
It's all about, just like BioShock's Jack. You don't know anything from previous. You're kind of exploring this new world because in Prey, your main character Morgan has amnesia.
Right. Which is a super used game trope, but the reason it works is that now your character experiences things the same way you do.
And the thing is there's a bunch of different stuff, and I don't want to spoil anything with the story, but it's, there's certain people telling you it's a derelict spaceship, but there's a few people still left on it. And then there's also robotic companions that are sometimes, they'll tell you, oh, well, I was supposed to tell you in case of this that you're supposed to do this. And then somebody will come over the radio and be like, no, you should do this. So it's kind of that whole like, who do I trust as you're slowly figuring out what happened on the ship. So it's very narrative driven. In the way that you're always going somewhere to do something, whether it's for this reason or that reason, it's always pushing you forward. Now, when you
say that there's those branching options, do they really give you the freedom to fully explore one path or the other, or is it like a gray area kind of thing where there is no right answer, or do they eventually funnel you into the same path and just kind of give you the illusion of choice?
Okay, so there's kind of different choices you can make. When it comes down to like the way you approach objectives, that is very, very much up to you. It is kind of like it's your playground. You do as you want. Sometimes there was parts where I kind of made really cheap jumps and kind of cheesed the game that I probably wasn't supposed to make. So it is optional in that way, but there is bigger choices in the way that they do the side quests, because a lot of the side quests, the main game funnels you through the different areas of the spaceship, but it's not like a level 1, level 2, level 3 kind of thing. You're going to be going back and forth, and as you go back and forth, you're finding these little side stories, and then as you finish them up, you'll have kind of continuing storylines, and then you'll get presented with choices like, do I take this person out lethally, or do I try to sedate them or take them down non-lethally and then use them, things like Deus Ex. And sometimes there's even bigger things that are like, hey, this section of the ship is going to run out of oxygen and everyone on there is going to die unless you do this in this amount of time, or you can go do this or save this person or that person. So there's sometimes like weird, almost Telltale-esque choices being made.
Okay.
But the game truly is about choosing the way you want to play. There's achievements in this game for not buying any sort of skills at all. Right. There's achievements in this game for buying only mutant skills, only human skills. So the game can be completed kind of however you really want it to be completed, but it's completely up to you how you approach things.
When I think of the appeal of BioShock, it was that for the time, it was one of the best examples of that sort of immersive storytelling, environmental storytelling. And the enemies were sort of a constant bit of engagement, and the plasmids really shone with them. And then when I think of Dishonored, I think of the combat being really fun, the combination of powers being really elegant, but also with Dishonored, it was the level design being genius, and also the tiny little details of the environment where I just remember so much of them and they were so dense. So in a space station like this, where you're saying that the enemies are kind of pushed to the secondary, is there enough detail and lore and environmental storytelling here to keep you engaged throughout?
It's a heavy question. There's a lot of facets to that question that I want to get into. So first and foremost, let me just make this clear. The enemies at points, kind of like how I felt in Outlast 2, they kind of are detrimental because enemies are super hard to kill. And not because they're like very, very good. They just do a ton of damage. I'm playing on easy, and easy mode feels like late game normal for any other game. It is tough. It is difficult. And if you get stuck into a point where you don't have a lot of med kits or something is locked down, I had a situation where I was confined to a singular area for a little bit because of a narrative thing, and I was just out of everything. I didn't have ammo. I didn't have whatever. And I kept having to restart because it was so difficult. And that's why I say that, like, it's confusing because they put you into situations where you have to fight enemies, but they're so difficult that it feels like you're supposed to run away from them. So it's weird in that. But the thing about the powers is Dishonored was very much about using the powers in conjunction and kind of, like you said, comboing them together. I think the powers in Prey are more passively OP, overpowered, that is, meaning like you can get a power that lets you jump 3 times as high. It's really overpowered, but passively overpowered. You're not going to get something super cool that ties into another move like that. So I think the Dishonored powers are better than Prey in that regard, but Prey has some pretty cool things. Now, the thing about Dishonored is that Dishonored was, it did a good job using level design, specifically Dishonored 2, to bring out all the details in the level. The problem with this Prey is that the game is super designed or super detailed. Okay, there's a lot of stuff on screen at once. It's super overwhelming sometimes visually because there's a lot of textures, a lot of little items to pick up. The biggest problem I have with it is, well, beyond the technical problems, like there's tons of texture pop in, and in certain areas they do not hold back. They load everything in. So when you're in these big like cargo bays where there's 5 floors down, you can see every little item on every desk. This consoles will chug like to 15 FPS consistently. So that's a big deal. But in terms of exploration's cool, but only if it's varied. And on a space station, and the way it's all futuristic looking, it kind of gets one note. There's only so much difference between like the med bay and the shuttle bay. There's some cool sections, like there's the crew quarters, which is kind of like a hotel. So you have like all the cabins, then you have a rec room and a fitness area with a pool. And there's some cool stories in there too. Like you do a little side story where you're trying to follow around these little maps that a group of crewmates made together because they were playing like a D&D game, and you're trying to find like a little treasure. So it's cool, but a lot of the areas kind of boil down to, ooh, it's very aesthetically pleasing and, metallic, but it's a space station and there's not a lot of variety. Whereas in BioShock, here's this grand bar where they're celebrating New Year's. Here's like this crazy forest. Here's Arcadia, like very colorful and stuff like that. It's kind of, so-so. There's some cool standout parts, some cool areas, but visually the art style is kind of dull, unfortunately. But it's flip-flop because the art style is dull, but there's so much stuff in the environment that, it's not terrible to walk around because there's always something interesting to look at. There's a lot of documents, a lot of lore. You hack into computers in this game a lot, much like Deus Ex. So you're reading through emails, you're checking on utilities and reading notes and books and stuff like that. So there's a lot of lore, more so than there is in BioShock. I wouldn't say as much like in the way of collectibles and documents that's in Deus Ex, but yeah, there's a bigger backstory here.
So the gist I'm getting is that sort of a jack of all trades, maybe not a master of none. It's a nice collection of previous Arcane games, previous games that end in the word shock. Is there anything in this game that really stands out that only Prey is doing really well? And are the mimics? Because when I was looking at this, I thought, cool, a space station. I'm hoping for a really, really strong story. Yeah. And then hopefully they can do something really interesting with this ability to shift into any object. The developers are always talking about that. Like, oh yeah, turn into a guitar. And then the alien comes in, he's like, there's no guitar. Well, I mean, there's no person, only a guitar.
It's those kind of abilities, you don't use them much because it's not like the AI is super, super great, to be honest. Okay. Especially once you get your stealth points up, they're not really they're not smart. So you don't use that stuff a lot. And as you were saying that, that's what Prey is. It's a jack of all trades, because when I look at it, I've played this game before, maybe not in this way. Right. It's a game that really embraces exploration. It's a game that wants you to take your time. It's a game that has horror elements. It's a lot of pieces that we've seen together. And when I think about it, I think no one has done all those things together in such I don't want to say complex way, and I don't want to say overwhelming, but it feels very inclusive. It takes everything that was good about BioShock, everything that was good about Deus Ex, and some things I don't like about Deus Ex, but I don't have those issues here because Prey does it pretty well. Then again, there's some stop-ups where you kind of go, oh, where am I supposed to go? Was I supposed to go here? Sometimes it's hard to find items because there's so much stuff. But for the most part, Prey doesn't do anything besides it has a very interesting story. And I don't want to spoil things, but the way the experiments and the things going on, the ship kind of work, kind of make it almost, if you've ever seen Christopher Nolan's Memento or any kind of movie that kind of splits up, like I was saying earlier, you don't know who to trust. You don't know if you should believe your own memory, if you can even believe yourself or the things that you've left for yourself. So there's a lot of intrigue. And I told you, I think over text chat, I said it's low key interesting, and that's what it is.
Thanks for remembering.
It's Sometimes I have a bad memory.
I know it was me because I sent you that picture of Loki
from the Thor, from the Avenger movie.
That was my low-key joke.
No, it's not in your face interesting like in the way that Infinite is, like BioShock Infinite, where you're like, oh, we're floating in the sky and stuff. It's got a lot of intrigue and it can go places, but it's a slow burn. It's a very slow burn. A lot of the game is pushing your goalposts. You're like, got to go through this door, but to go through this door, I need a key card. But to get this key card, I got to do a favor for somebody. So it's a lot of that kind of storytelling. When it comes down to things that a Prey is doing and only Prey is doing, it's kind of that mimic stuff, like you were saying. But the problem is only the little enemies will do it. So only your little 1-hit or 2-hit with your wrench enemies will do that. It'd be really cool if you walked into a room and one of the bigger phantom human-sized enemies was like dressed up as like a lamp or something and then came out from that. But you only ever see the little enemies, and they don't really use that much. So yeah, I guess. And the
little enemy, you were saying a lot of the enemies do a ton of damage. So when a little enemy comes out of nowhere, is it more just annoying? You're like, coffee cup, and hit it? Or is it an actual danger?
The first 5 hours, you could die from like 4 of them at once. But then once you get any of like the kinetic abilities or the mutagen abilities, right. Like if I look at a group of 4 of those and I use a single spell or a single like area of effect electricity spell, I'll kill it, even if it's not upgraded. So in the beginning, yes, they're difficult. But after a while, they're a nuisance. You can hit them once with your wrench and kill them once or twice. And after a while, you don't really notice them pop up because the game is horror kind of or scary for the first hour, more like first 3 or 4 hours. But after that, you can kind of kill the little enemies a lot, the ones that are going to jump out at you. So you don't. A lot of the time, an enemy will morph from something, and I'll barely notice because I wasn't paying attention in the first place. And I'll just be like, killed you. Not a big deal. It loses the horror after a while, and they don't utilize that mechanic of the shape-shifting in any other obvious gameplay ways. They might use it in the story, and I don't know about it, but as far as gameplay-wise, it's just the little enemies that shapeshift, and everything else is kind of just like a body bag that you shoot at,
Wow.
They have their own powers, but
Is the overall story compelling enough to keep you going with this?
it definitely is. And that's what I'm saying, that Prey is a sci-fi mystery in the way it tells its story. It has horror elements, but it's very much a mystery, and it consistently kind of feeds you breadcrumbs. It's a slow burn, so it's not like 10 hours in you're gonna be like, I was an alien the whole time, or some crazy stuff like that. It's like, okay, you're slowly unraveling the threads of the story. And much like a game like Outlast or any game that has a lot of documents, the more time you spend reading the emails, listening to the audio logs, you'll get a better idea of what had happened. But on a base level, even if you ignore that stuff, the story is very good about, kind of slowly giving you intrigue and something to push you towards the next thing. But at the same time, the story isn't so motivated and pushing you forward that it's okay to kind of explore off or go to an area you're not supposed to or not directed to and explore. So that's why I say it's low-key interesting, is because I don't feel like I need to go to the next main mission because it's that cool, but I like the story. It's not, yeah, I got to wait for the payoff and see if they do anything with it.
Sure.
Because it's building up a lot of cool intrigue, and there's a lot of very, not complex things, but it could make for a interesting ending that might require some thinking. And if they pull that off, it'll be good. But if it ends at a one note kind of like that's the end, then all the intrigue and mystery was for none. So
you're at this point, you're about 80 to 90% completed through the game.
Yeah, I would like to say that, but like I said, a lot of this game is pushing your goalpost back. There's several times where I thought I was almost done with this section, and then there's 2 more objectives that push me back. As far as progression of a narrative arc can go, I would say that I've learned quite a lot as a character, and that I would feel like I'm reaching the apex of everything that's going to happen, kind of. And that's why I'm really waiting to see if this intrigue pays off in a cool way, apex is in a cool climax, and then the ending of the game is figuring out the rest of it. But yeah, I'm pretty close to the end. At this point, I've spent quite a lot of time. I've visited almost every area on the ship, been through it back and forth 2 or 3 times, because a lot of this game is going across the ship as a map, really. You're going to areas, but you'll revisit them quite often. So I would say I've been in the ship long enough that I feel like my time is kind of waning towards the end. Yeah, I would say there's no way that I'm anything less than 75% of the way done. Yeah.
Okay, I just really wanted to know if you felt like you'd played enough to recommend it to people or not.
Yeah, and I can say, without giving a score or anything like that, I can say that if you like games that allow exploration, like Deus Ex, and you're interested in a sci-fi mystery, if you like Deus Ex and you like sci-fi, give it a go. If you like BioShock, give it a go, but understand that there is a lot of crafting. Crafting is super important in this game, but also understand that the game is tough. So you want to have a challenge. Unlike BioShock, you cannot put it on easy and just hit every enemy in the head with a wrench 5 times and beat the game. Like, you'll have to really spend some time thinking about being strategic and tactical, and sometimes you have to, sit back and wait. So it's a game that will require quite a few hours to really get a lot out of. Yeah, it's a hard game to recommend because there's a lot of reasons I would say not to also play it, but I feel like the positives greatly outweigh the negatives. So I would say if you like sci-fi and you like a little bit of RPG elements as well, that's good. As long as you're not looking for a horror game or a action first-person shooter, because if you're looking for any of those 2 things, you'll be greatly disappointed because it's not a horror game and it's not a first-person shooter.
There you have it. I think this is a game I was super interested when I first saw the trailer. I love sci-fi, mystery, light horror. I'm fine with it being kind of a jack of all trades as long as it has an intriguing story. Crafting, I'm not so big on. I don't like grinding through games. This game has been on a funny little roller coaster where the demo came out and a lot of people were not so big on it. They said that the demo didn't really highlight anything interesting about it. And then,
Yeah.
of course, Bethesda doesn't allow for these review copies to come out, so everyone's kind of scrambling to get any kind of first impression on it.
Well, and that's the weirdest thing about this game is that this game at this point is either going to end up being really good and surprising me, or it's going to fall off flat and end up being like a pretty decent experience. And the thing is, this game has a lot of potential, and I just don't feel like they use some of the ideas they had. Like I said, mimicking could be way more utilized. There could be some better direction, obviously, but then you kind of sacrifice the openness that they're trying to go for. So if they can wrap it up narratively and make it a thoughtful, intelligent story, it's going to definitely earn them points. But, overall, I think the inevitable Prey 2 will be way better. But it's a solid
And that's
game.
what people wanted out of this. They
Well, and
wanted
that's
the
the
old
funniest
Prey
thing.
2.
Yeah, and it's weird. That's the weirdest thing about this game is that it doesn't have any ties to the original IP. It's its own thing. It's basically System Shock 4, BioShock 5. It's weird.
And there is a new System Shock coming out too. System
Yeah,
Shock
which would
3.
be interesting because that will probably be a lot like this. Yeah, it's a game. I guess wait until I finish up and then I can probably say for sure if it's worth going through as a narrative.
Right.
Because at this point, the combat's okay. The exploration is fun, but it's nothing crazy good. Like I have a better time exploring something like Skyrim, obviously. And the narrative is interesting. But if the narrative falls flat, then all of my intrigue was kind of worthless. And then it gets way lower from there.
That's an interesting thing about this game is that for Bethesda to do their current review strategy, with a game like Doom, everyone knows the name.
Yeah.
And you can play the first, especially that incredible opening sequence in Doom, and you can sell somebody on it. But
know what you're getting right from the get-go when you play Doom.
Yeah, you can just watch 30 seconds of somebody playing it, and then they'll say, well, it's like this the whole time, and then the story is funny and engaging enough.
Prey has evolved so many times over the 20 hours I've been playing that I wouldn't be surprised if there was, the ending of the game was much different from the middle part of the game. And there's the potential for them to make a great story here and to really finish off strong,
Right.
Just because the game got a little bit dull in the middle of it doesn't mean it's not going to end amazingly. So it's really one of those games that I'm going to have to finally finish before I know if it's really as good as I think it is or if it's really as bad as it might be. Who knows?
Okay. All right. Let's switch it up a little bit. Here's a game I've been playing. Are you familiar with Grand Theft Auto?
What's a Grand Theft Auto? Which one?
I've been playing 5 and 4 simultaneously.
Ooh,
Well, not
that's
simultaneously. I go from one TV to the other.
You're just one hand with each. You're just.
I had never played GTA 5, and I probably played GTA 4, maybe the intro back in like 2009.
Really?
Are you familiar? I know you're familiar with them. Everyone is, but have you played them?
I beat GTA 4. I was super, super, super into Grand Theft Auto 4. I love that game.
Okay.
Grand Theft Auto 5, I played about halfway through the story on the Xbox 360, picked it back up when they did the first-person shooting thing on Xbox One, and I had rented it or borrowed it from a friend, so I only played it maybe an hour or two, or more than that, but no further than I had originally had. So halfway through GTA 5, but I love GTA 4, which is weird because not a lot of people love that game as much as I do.
Yeah, in terms of GTA, I mean, 3 was obviously, even the top-down one was a great diversion on PC, and 3 was just such a landmark moment. I mean, it was one of the first games.
3 is fantastic.
It was one of those first games that I saw people playing at parties. And I thought, oh, these people like video games? Cool. Normally video games were something I didn't talk to people about at parties. I just went home and did by myself or with my more nerdy friends, right? But to see people passing the controller around, and then I loved Vice City. I didn't really like San Andreas. I think it got too far into the whole, I didn't want to spend time working out and doing all that crap.
I actually agree with you. A lot of people think that GTA San Andreas is one of the best, and I would rather play Vice City over that. I've never even beat San Andreas. I've maybe played 3 hours of that game, and I was like, yeah, I don't care.
So I started GTA 5, and I think I've just discovered Trevor, and then we've done a couple of missions with Trevor. So leading up to it, I was really into the story. I thought it was kind of an interesting. This GTA 5 feels like they're trying to please every fan of GTA. I think that there are very different people that like Vice City that like San Andreas, and I think that in 5, You've obviously got, what's the big fat white guy's name? Michael?
Yeah, Michael. There's Michael, Trevor, and Lincoln,
Franklin.
right? Franklin,
Lincoln. I like Lincoln.
Lincoln.
That's his middle name. So, I mean, Michael is like Tommy Vercetti, or he's the guy from Vice City. And
Yeah.
then you've got Lincoln Franklin, and he's sort of your San Andreas type, living in the hood. And then when Trevor gets involved, I feel like Trevor is the GTA fan. Trevor is like the kid. Trevor reminds me of a kid playing GTA and thinking he's really cool because he's swearing and doing evil things.
Yeah. No, Trevor is like the GTA 3 guy, but after he had to come to terms with all the horrid shit that the players made him do. Like, that's what Trevor is, like the guy who just at this point gives no F's at all. Like, he does not care about anything. He's the most crude dude. I think Trevor is awesome. I love Trevor, but
really, I didn't mind him at first, but when there was a bit of intelligence behind what he was doing, and I do find it fascinating how he always takes over a situation, and I think that they do a pretty believable job of whenever he comes in, he tends to be able to take it over, and they provide justification for that. But he's just a little too like, when you're playing online and there's some kid who's just like, "Fuck you, man! Fuck this." That's what Trevor feels like. I'm playing online with this kid.
Trevor is super foul mouthed in the beginning, and like a lot of the stuff he does is super obnoxious. Some of that adds charm to his character, but at the same time, some of it doesn't. But as the story progresses, Trevor's character grows, and you'll like where Trevor goes.
Well, so after I had played GTA 5 for quite a while, I thought I'm gonna go back and play 4.
Oh God!
And I hopped in, and 4 was I can see why they might have divided some people because it definitely. Like, it's compared to San Andreas, it's so zoomed in.
Yeah.
I mean, you only have that tiny little neighborhood to explore. Going back to it, I was really surprised at how foggy it is. And
the cars control like shit. Well, they control realistically compared to like GTA 5's kind of arcadey controls.
Speaking of car controls, for a game that is 80% about driving around, I can't believe they've never really nailed car controls. Or I think I remember enjoying it a lot more in Vice City, but I think 4 was trying to be realistic. 5 is a little more arcadey, but it's still not great.
I like 5's driving, but only when you're playing as Franklin, because Franklin can like slow down time and stuff, and I think he has the best control of it. I like 3 a ton. I think 3 has some of the best driving when it comes down to like the sedans and the convertibles and stuff. Some of the bigger vehicles and the helicopter. You can't drive a helicopter in 3.
But I think it should have been way more arcadey because the game is all about running around. It should be like Need for Speed. It should just be arcade action, flying around corners. And I mean, even after like 10 hours, if you're still having a tough time nailing something, you kind of figure out the tricks, but I still feel like I have to slow down too much. I want it to feel like Mario Kart.
Yeah.
But even though GTA 4 is full of bloom and foggy and not that great looking, I was immediately way more interested in the characters and the stories, and what Nico was doing, his annoying cousin.
What draws me in.
Like, his cousin comes out, and at first he seems like such an annoying prick, but once you do a couple missions with him, and you really start to care about him, and then you see that he's a prick, but then he's got this other prick that's busting his balls all the time, and I was way more interested in even the first few hours of GTA 4's story.
Well, here's the thing: is if you look back at GTA and how they've told the story, and this is I know exactly why you probably like this, because GTA 3 was you're the one guy and you're going to different people, you're doing missions. Vice City was like that too. San Andreas really busted it open and made it kind of like this, you can go all these different places. And GTA 5 has so much stuff that there's so much stuff to focus on, right?
Yeah.
And the story is so big and so epic, and some of these missions are so big and so epic that it loses sight of the characters. GTA 4 is all about Nico coming to America and trying to get his feet on the ground. So every mission is really about him, his interactions with different people that he's meeting, finding new friends. So in that way, GTA 4, I feel, has a stronger story because it's more of a character study and it's more reserved. Whereas GTA 5, like you're driving in a mission where you're trying to catch a guy who's stealing your boat. Mm-hmm. So you're jumping from your ship to your boat and all this stuff. And you don't have time to stop and think about the characters. But GTA 4 was more of a mob
all the
story.
Time too, right? Because once you start getting into a character, they just flip you over. I mean, the things that GTA 5 does a million times better are obviously the big action scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, the heists are amazing. The amount
Yeah.
of when I drove towards the first heist and I thought that I needed to be like, all right, let's be cool. We're in a convoy, and I was stopped at a light, and then playing on the PS4 and you're in first person. There was a
Yeah.
cop over to the left, and I moved the camera over to look at him, and he's just staring straight at me. And I thought,
No,
and that was
I
such a
love
cool moment. Even though there really was no risk to anything, I probably just could have banged into him and drove off. But the sort of the scenario I'd painted in my mind was that this guy's watching me. Be cool.
Yeah, GTA 5 really honestly is one of those kind of games where you can put yourself into first person mode and just walk, and it'll be an experience. GTA 4 doesn't really have that, doesn't feel as lived in.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of GTA 4 still kind of relies on you getting into the scripted sequences, where 5
Yeah.
is more like a playground. If I'm too tired to play anything, but I just want to mess around on something, I'd much rather put on 5 than 4.
Put on exactly, because 4 is more, like I said, it's about 4 focuses on the narrative. 4's focus is beyond, the bloodshed and all the crazy stuff, is the narrative, whereas 5 is really about being epic and being big and allowing a bunch of different things. So I mean, that's why you see all the mods and all the people loving GTA Online. It's a huge playground. It's fun.
GTA 5 was the number 2 most downloaded game this month on PSN.
Oh, I believe that. I can believe that shit's still selling well into next year.
Yeah.
Rockstar games do great, and GTA 5 is one of the best sandbox games in general that there is. When you come down to size of the map and things to do within it, and different activities and options, like it's just a great game objectively at that point.
One of the fascinating things about playing a GTA game is that you can see these elements of PS2 gameplay. They always bring a lot of that with them. Where, I mean, especially in 5, when you're doing these really like a lot of boundary pushing things that Rockstar is coming up with, new kind of gameplay types. But then there's still these odd things like go up to this person and then it kind of activates like a cutscene, and just kind of the way the HUD is, and sometimes like even the menu,
some artifacts of old game design.
Yeah, it's really
kind of
strange all that gets pulled. And then when you go back to 4, going back even further and seeing how they do it, it's just Rockstar is on their own Rockstar Island that they bought because they made so much money, and they make games the way they want to. You kind of have to relearn how to shoot a weapon and stuff, because a lot of times everything's just on funny buttons. You're like, what the hell is this?
What is this?
But I'd say overall GTA 5 was for somebody that's been away from the series for a while. I got it half price, and I mean I think it's worth full price. There's so much content in it, even the parts that I don't really connect with. There's still enough, and I think that because they went for this 3 story thing, there's enough for me to grab onto and keep going. But probably the biggest takeaway was that GTA 4 is still really fun and interesting to go back to now.
And it's interesting because it shows that GTA is a series that is not one note. People are always talking about Grand Theft Auto in this kind of like, all you do is kill hookers and steal their money and beat up old ladies and stuff. Like that's always the line on Grand Theft Auto. But when you look at it, they've told some crazy different stories as a franchise, a series. They've told more diverse stories featuring more diverse characters in a bunch of different locations and having completely different gameplay and play styles as well. Sure, you can always take a car and run it into somebody, but the whole entire context surrounding it is different for every game. And I would say that even if you look at a game like Saints Row, like how much that evolved, I think Grand Theft Auto has evolved way more, and people just don't notice it because everyone goes, oh, it's Grand Theft Auto. And I know people who treat Grand Theft Auto kind of like they treat Call of Duty in that dismissive way. And it's like, yeah, but except for Rockstar are some of the best narrative, weavers there are. People who talk about Red Dead Redemption like it's the next coming of Christ, and then they'll be like, oh, Grand Theft Auto. And I'm like, it's the same guys, right?
Well, isn't it Rockstar North does?
Yeah, but in general, I say everybody Rockstar, like Red Dead, Grand Theft Auto, everybody who's worked at Rockstar has made a great game. Or they make good games. Look at L.A. Noire. That wasn't even made by Rockstar. That was Team Bondi, but Rockstar had a helping hand in it. Like, Rockstar knows what they're doing when it comes to telling good stories, is all I'm saying.
And I think they tell them in a very, very unique way.
Yeah.
And the cinematic way the cinematic sort of feel that they managed to achieve is really, really impressive. I think GTA 5 kind of devolves into a bit more of a series of skits as opposed to like a gigantic branching story, but I think they do that really well. And I mean, this isn't a newsflash to say that GTA 5 is a good game, but if there are, there's probably 15 people out there that haven't played it yet, and I'd say give it a chance.
Hey, you should play it. It's a good one.
All right, now there's
I
yeah, keep going.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I've been playing some games that I haven't picked up in a while, and I was like playing Professor Layton on 3DS. It's such a weird thing for me, of the guy who's always playing like Xbox and PS4 and stuff like that. But if you've never checked out Professor Layton on 3DS, and piggyback off like the 2DS XL thing, because they just announced a 2DS XL, and for if whatever reason you're picking up a 2DS XL and it's like your first go, and you're looking for a fun game, try Professor Layton. It's been around since like Nintendo DS, so you can find this series for super cheap. But I've been playing Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, which is a cross game that features it has gameplay from the Professor Wright series, or Professor Layton, which is puzzle, and then the Phoenix Wright, which is kind of like visual novel, but you're an attorney in a courtroom. It's really cool. But that's something I've been having fun with.
I've always wanted to play the Phoenix Wright games. You know, when I did my very, very first interview of game developers, I went to this awesome collective they have in Toronto, where tons of the guys that make Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time.
Oh, okay.
They're based out of there, and some other like big games. Anyways, I was interviewing these devs that made this cool game called Fate Tectonics, and I was asking them at the end, like, oh, just tell me your favorite games. And it was like the head of this one company, so he's like kind of the cool guy. Like, and then he told me Phoenix Wright, and the way he said it was as if like everybody knows this game. And then I asked
Phoenix
him,
Wright,
and I said, oh, what's that for? And he kind of looked at me like I was an idiot when he said DS.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh
DS.
Shit, I was supposed to know that one. But I've just never had a DS.
Long. It's such a long series. I think at this point, like including the spin-offs, Phoenix Wright probably has 10 games at least. Like there's a lot. Just like Professor Layton has like 8, and there's the spin-offs are starting.
So I really should have known about it.
Well, Professor Layton is interesting because like Phoenix Wright is interesting because it is a game that you can hop in. Like you could play Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright and be fine, even though it's like one of the most recent ones.
Yeah.
But if you jump in at like Professor Layton 3, you're going to be confused. So it's just now reached the point of popularity where the spin-off games and like the games that don't require you to know all of the series lore are finally appearing. So yeah, dude, it's a good time to jump in. Phoenix Wright, a lot of bang for your buck. There's like usually 6 or 7, because they break them up into cases, you know, so you'll go out and you'll investigate the crimes and all that stuff. But like 6 or 7 really good varied cases per game. So if you like mysteries and stuff like that, yeah, Phoenix Wright for DS and 3DS is fantastic.
Hey, here's another old game I've been playing.
Let me know.
X-Wing Alliance.
Oh, yeah? You were playing, what were you playing a few weeks ago? X Commander or Wing Commander?
I was trying to play Wing Commander, but the PC version doesn't have speech, so I'm going to grab the Sega CD version.
Rip, because that's what when you said that, that's what I thought of. What is this then? You said it's
X-Wing Alliance. This is
the Star Wars.
Yeah, so this was the last game in the TIE Fighter series, or the X-Wing series.
Okay.
So at X-Wing in the early 90s, TIE Fighter perfected the formula. X-Wing versus TIE Fighter came out, but they pulled a dice, like with Battlefront, and they focused only on multiplayer, and everyone's like, oh, what the hell? The TIE Fighter story was so good. But and then by the time they put out the expansion, Balance of Power, it was too late. People had moved on. But X-Wing Alliance was sort of the last gasp, and I've been jumping into that. And then I grabbed it. There's a whole bunch of like really easy to install mods, so it looks really good.
Nice.
And they sort of fixed a lot of things. They let it go widescreen, which is not a big deal to me. I like to play things in whatever the correct aspect ratio is. You know when you go on YouTube and you watch a Let's Play of a Super Nintendo game or something, and they stretch it out?
Yeah, are you trying to find like a clip from like Nickelodeon and it's like 4:3 and they pull it to 16:9 so it looks like everyone's face is pulled by putty? I hate that.
Or when my girlfriend takes a video of me and she does it vertically.
Oh, fuck.
Landscape.
Stop using vertical, guys.
Landscape mode.
2017.
So anyways, hang on real quick. This game is awesome, X-Wing Alliance.
PC?
Yeah, it's for PC, and probably just PC. I got it on like Good Old Games or Steam.
Yeah.
Oh, it was like the Star Wars Humble Bundle. I got so many games for so cheap.
Because there's so many of those, and there's a lot of them for like PS1 and stuff like that too.
Yeah, like Dark Forces was really good.
Jedi Outcast 2, or Jedi Academy, whatever that one was. I think it was GameCube and PS2.
Ooh, very nice.
Go the X Fighter Wing Star Wars
But if
2.
you are into like sci-fi flying games, for GameCube there was Rogue Squadron, which is really really
That's
good.
what I was thinking of. Yes, that game is so good.
And you know what was really great? Rogue Squadron 3, I believe, also included the complete Rogue Squadron 2 game, but now it was co-op split screen. Like what a
Wait,
what a
really?
cool feature.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you
I
buy the
guess
third game, they give you the last one, and now you can play it together. It's so cool because you couldn't
back
do
when
that in.
they used to give us those games as like bonus unlocks. Now they charge us $60 and call them a remaster.
Yeah,
Oh well, life goes on.
but yeah, this is right up there with TIE Fighter. Whereas X-Wing versus TIE Fighter was very disappointing. They do a great job of presenting. The nice thing about this one is that the perspective is you aren't a rebel and you're not an Imperial. You are just a family of traitors. Not traitors like filthy scum traitor, like people who
Yeah.
trade goods. And of
Yeah.
course, you fly YT-1300s, which are Millennium Falcon type looking ships.
The best ones.
And you're just sort of starting this plot off. This is eventually you'll join the Rebel Alliance, but to start, your family's not really sure which way to go. And it's which I think is a very realistic thing. You'd probably, you hear about rebellions happening all over, even in our world today. And
Yeah.
you don't really know which side to take. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't really do anything about it. You just kind of want to go about your day. So if you've been like craving TIE Fighter, you've never played this game, I highly suggest getting it.
I mean, Star Wars, for all the bad games there have been some pretty good ones. There was an Xbox crew. It was like a squad based. What was it? Xbox. It was Star Wars. Rogue, not Squadron. You were like a bunch of
Xbox One?
stormtrooper guys. No.
I mean,
Original
OG
Xbox.
Xbox. Oh,
Yeah,
right.
original Xbox. It was you played as a squad of stormtrooper looking guys. I'm trying to remember because it was really, 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 really good.
On the
Find that.
Xbox.
Yeah.
You know the best Star Wars game on the original Xbox, Knights of the Old Republic.
Well, that's an RPG. This is a squad based first person shooter, where you played as you weren't
Republic Commando?
stormtroopers. Yeah, dude, Republic Commando. Wow, that game was real good.
Really?
Yeah, at least
Shows-
I remember it to be.
Shows you the dark and gritty side.
Yeah, I mean it was that it was dark and gritty. You were like
So
in
it's set
war.
in it's set in the prequel time?
I think yes.
Because
I want to
of
say
the Republic.
it's after 2. I would say, or in 2. But yeah, it's cool. It's like Battlefield Republic, but Star Wars. That's what it is.
Were you a KOTOR guy? Did you play KOTOR?
I played a little bit of KOTOR. My older brother was way more into KOTOR. I wasn't into Western RPGs or RPGs in general until 360.
You were
but
like
yeah.
JRPG or bust?
I didn't. Well, I was into action games, and I couldn't really wrap
Oh.
my head around RPGs. I was never really into RPGs as a kid. My weird games that I would play that took more time were point and click adventures. So
Okay.
the games that I would really invest a lot of time into were those. Otherwise, I was playing like Mario and like Duke Nukem and stuff like that.
What do you
I guess
mean, what do
RPGs.
you mean, like King's Quest?
Yeah, so that kind of stuff. Like RPGs, I didn't like turn-based RPGs, and that's what a lot of the stuff you saw in like SNES. And since I didn't like turn-based RPGs, I didn't really pay attention to the RPG genre as it progressed on PS2 and Xbox. And I didn't really try again until I got a 360 and was like, oh, there's only a few games because it's the launch, so let's try Blue Dragon. And then I kind of got back into it. So
What the
Yeah.
hell is Blue Dragon?
Blue Dragon, it was a game that launched in like 2006. It was popular in Japan, not as popular over here. It's like a 3-disc title. if I
Written
recall.
by Sakaguchi of Final
I mean,
Fantasy fame.
there's definitely some names on that. It wasn't just
Composer.
like throwaway.
Nobuo Uematsu, Mr. Final Fantasy.
Yeah, no, it's a good game.
Holy
It's a good
Lord.
time, guys. And you could probably, if you're get up after watching this video, or take it with you in your car, go to GameStop. I bet you money Blue Dragon on 360 is like $4. You could probably buy. They'll give you that game for free. There's so many copies. It launched with the system, I think. But yeah, it's a good time, guys.
3 discs on the 360.
Yeah, at least.
I found Knights of the Old Republic 2 on the Mac store. It was so cheap. And,
What?
And it's really hard getting back into that very like archaic, slowed down battle system. And
And that's the thing. I can't go back now because
it's very hard. It's
Yeah.
nice to think about and be nostalgic about. Also, you know what they did a lot in that era when they'd have
What?
cutscenes. People just kind of stand and they would stare at each other, and it would be like camera shot here, camera shot
Oh
here,
yeah.
and then when they were finished talking, they would go from a standstill to just running, especially if they were
Well,
going to attack you.
It's old school, and that's the thing is like I've wanted to play Knights of the Old Republic so many times, but I don't have the nostalgia for it that I can't like grit my teeth and go through it. I'll just be like, this is stupid, and wait for the remake or the remaster that will eventually come. Eventually.
I mean, I probably got a good 10, 15 hours into KOTOR 2 playing on a MacBook Air laptop, and
Right.
it's one of those things where with those older games, you just have to almost like set aside the time and make an appointment to play them. Like, all right, I'm gonna put 20 minutes a day into Final Fantasy 4.
Yeah,
And
that's why. Because if you stop, you'll forget everything because it's not like it's modernized or it's going to be very handholdy.
No, yeah,
So
there's not going to be very many journals and all. Like if you, oh my god, I remember Final Fantasy 7 stepping away from that when it first come out, and then you come back and you go, I don't know where the hell I'm supposed to go.
what am I? Where do I go? Who do I do?
Yeah, I'm having.
But-
I mean, now we have walkthroughs that are so easily accessible, but
Yeah, it's not even an issue. I've been playing a lot of other stuff too, but it's been like small stuff. Like I played a lot of Mario Kart with my younger brother. He got on a Switch, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That's been fun. I played Little Nightmares recently.
yeah, what's Little
Been a lot-
Nightmares all
lot of
about?
game- Little Nightmares is, you remember Inside, right? The game Inside and Limbo.
Yeah, one of the best games of the year.
Okay, Little Nightmares is that, but Tim Burton. That's pretty much what Little Nightmares
So a
is.
little more playfully disturbing.
Yeah. In the way that, like, kind of how Coraline has some disturbing imagery, but it's not like that's the thing. Inside is messed up and it goes some weird places. Like it's pretty dark. But Little Nightmares is more about like, ooh, who's this creepy clown-looking guy, or a lot of monster designs that are really weird and kind of out there and just odd and trippy. The story is very, very, I would say, even less comprehensible. Not comprehensible because it is a straightforward story if you think about it, but it takes more thought than Inside did. Inside is straightforward as well, but it takes a few days of like, oh yeah, and then there was that part to really get the full idea of Inside. Whereas Little Nightmares is more about giving you a part of a game and like an encounter and making it fun and spooky. The narrative is less the focus, but it's still pretty cool. I would say that it's a good. If you told me that 3 or 4 or 5 of the guys who made Inside, 50%. If you told me that 50% of the people who made Inside Play Dead had made Little Nightmares, so it was just like a portion of the team,
Right.
I would believe it, is what I'm saying. So it's like, it's good. It's definitely really good. It's not as strong of a narrative. Sometimes the jumping and platforming can be kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pretty much just that. It's a 2D perspective. You're moving along, but you're moving in a 3D space. But it's always side. You're always moving, to the right. You're always progressing.
It's a puzzle platformer as the core gameplay.
Yeah, it's a little bit of. There's some stealth sections. There's a few sections that are surrounded by like, oh, there's a big monster moving around. You have to make sure you dodge him because you play as a character named Six, and she's a little teeny tiny, like literally. If this is my phone, 6 is like that big to scale in the world. So you're like running around like a little rat hiding under things and stuff. So there's some stealth sections, but a lot of it is kind of like, okay.
But everything else is to the scale of the real world. So are some of the enemies, say, the size of a human, and you're just sort of like Honey, I Shrunk the
Yes.
Kids running around?
Yes. Yeah. So like in a section there'll be like a big dude and he's like cutting up meat on a table, right?
Oh, cool.
And to get there you need to run up and like jump on some things to get onto the table to grab the key and pull it off. Like you are small. Rats are the size of you. So like when I say you play as a kid, like you play as a kid, but only in the sense that you're super small. You're like the size of a fetus probably. Like you're very, very, very small. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. It doesn't really come into well, no, yeah, they use it quite a bit in the game. I wouldn't say that your scale is like the forefront of the game.
Yeah.
Kind of like how I Shrunk the Kids is all about being super small, but it is an aspect of it. It's a cool time. It's very short, like 4 hours. There's only 5 sections of the game, and it only take you as long as you get stuck, and you might get stuck like once or twice.
What did you give it?
I believe I gave it a 8. Maybe an 8.5.
Good old
Somewhat.
8 out of 10.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's a short game. You'll beat it. I'd say wait for it to go on sale because it's $20 right now. And it's a little bit too short for $20. And
Yeah.
I also think that there's not a lot of replayability. You find little collectibles, but the story isn't so good that you'll go back. If anything, you'll just go from chapter select and find like your cool part that you want to show your friends, and that's it. I had fun with it, but it's a good time. It's just there's not a lot beyond once you've beaten the game.
Okay, well, we're coming up on an hour.
Yeah,
That was
been
fun.
a good episode.
Little casual chit chat we added.
It's a good podcast, man. People love listening. I think.
Listening is a fun thing to do.
No, they like listening to us, you know. So the more we talk, the more content they get.
You know, are you a fan of long podcasts?
My podcast that I do, Super Gamecast 64, you can find it on Stitcher and iTunes, usually goes between an hour and 30 minutes. But I know that that's a big thing. Some people like 18-minute, 20-minute really compact ones. And then you look at like Giant Bomb, and they do like 3-hour ones and sometimes.
Yeah.
So mine, I usually sit around an hour. Yeah.
I mean, I think go until you don't have anything else to talk about. But I like an hour and a half or 2 hours, especially if you mix it up with different segments. But I know
problem
some
is,
people are very, very adamant, because I think some people, they're completionists in a way. They don't want to just listen to something for 30 to 45 minutes and then have it sitting there in the little podcast tray not finished. But
Yeah.
I just think we'll just go back. It remembers your place.
Well, my thing is that there's two kinds of podcasts. Ones that are just like banter casts, as I call them, conversational talks. And there's ones that they're focusing in. Like there's a podcast called Retronauts, which make each one of their episodes is all about a very specific thing, and it's all about like the history of that thing, and that's cool. But that's a different kind of show. You know, the show I like is kind of like your talk show. We're talking about different stuff. We're not focused on one specific thing. So I think if you're focused on one specific game or series or idea that you're trying to talk about, like kind of how you do gameology, like that, yeah, it's more
Shorter.
compact. But I like the longer ones because this isn't like a performance. I'm not trying to, I have my writing for that. This is the discussion, and we like to talk about things. And yeah, I like the idea of conversationalist podcasts.
Me as well. All right. Well, if you like the conversational podcast and you know somebody that might like it, I'm not saying share it so that everyone sees what you shared, in case that causes you anxiety. Sometimes I don't like to put myself out there too, like somebody had a good YouTube video, was going to make a comment about it, and then I deleted it and closed the tab. But you could just tell them in a private message, hey, you might want to check this out, because it really helps more people listening. Nice. It's very rewarding.
We love hearing feedback.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at our YouTube videos and I see like this person's like, hey man, I really like this part. I'm like, yeah, dude, thanks. And we're small enough that I like to respond to all the comments and stuff too. So yeah, let's create a little community. I love talking.
Speaking of YouTube comments, I put up a gameplay video of Strafe. And
yeah, dude.
I'm not a mouse and keyboard guy at all. But did my best. We had a copy of it, an alpha build, so I wanted to show people. Man, there were like some people that were really angry. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. It's YouTube, right? One guy said, stop saying clip. So I listened to the beginning, and I probably said it like 3 times, and like, I bet this guy, he sounds like he hits his girlfriend. He's probably like, stop saying that.
Shots fired.
No, so I commented. I said, this isn't a live stream, so your advice is a bit meaningless. Well, keep it in mind for next time. Don't hit your girlfriend. And somebody else was like, they're like, great. No one else has gameplay. And this idiot's playing. He can't even use a mouse and keyboard.
This guy.
So I don't understand. It's like they can't just look at the gameplay and figure out what they think of the game. They're just like, he's not using a mouse and keyboard. Oh, I can't tell if it's good or not.
Guys, it's very simple. Let people enjoy things. Like, that's it. You don't have to be mean on the internet. Like, you can, but I don't care at all. Like, at all.
I always like responding and replying. I find when you reply to people that start off really negatively, they I know what he called me. He called me a no-name YouTuber, which I thought was hilarious.
Get wrecked, bud. I used to have a channel where, and actually, on my Super Gamecast channel, you can click through. I used to do kind of like videos. I'll probably take them down now that I think about it, because they're garbage. But they were like Angry Video Game Nerd. I did them around the same time. And then I used to get slaughtered because everyone would be like, you're copying James Rolfe. And I'm like, no, like, not really. It was completely different, but that was all nothing but hate. So YouTube is pretty fucking toxic. But what are you going to do, man?
The person was right. I am a no-name YouTuber, but that wasn't the point. but I said, hey, fellow no-name YouTuber. But I find when you respond to these people, they either never say anything back, or if they do, if they just keep coming at you negatively and all you say is like totally Vulcan, rational, logical things, it just makes them like seem crazier. So they generally don't. And sometimes we've been able to turn people around. Not so much on YouTube. On our site on the 90skid.com and the comments there, we've been able to turn people around and like actually have a good discussion. But I find YouTubers generally just kind of like hit and run.
Well, in general, it's kind of like I had a comment on one of my articles a while ago that was about the Switch when they first announced it and all the details, and I had wrote a piece about it, and it wasn't for a 90s kid, but I wrote a piece about it, and then somebody commented saying, "Whoever wrote this is an idiot. Check the official website," which was weird because that's where I got my information from. So I said, "Hey, it's me. I'm sorry you didn't like it. What was it that you found incorrect?" And then I never heard a response. So I'm like, what's the point? So when it comes down to like people being rude, unless they say something that I have a witty retort to, I don't really even bother, because it's like, okay, you got your little aggression out, man. Good job. It's the internet. No one cares. Like, I enjoy feedback, constructive criticisms,
Sure.
striking up. You know, like when the internet first came out, and everyone's like, "You're telling me I can talk to somebody in another country?" Like, I like that idea. Like,
Yeah.
I really like the idea of that. Not like yelling at somebody over the internet. Like, that's cool. I mean, I do it too sometimes, but it's the internet. What are you gonna do?
CBC. I'm in Canada. That's our Canadian broadcasting company. On
Yeah.
their on their website, you have to register to leave comments, and you can't use a nickname. You have to use your
Oh.
first and last name. So it's. I think it holds people a lot more accountable.
Yeah, especially when it's like a large entity and it's not just a person on the internet. I think it used to be like anyone would say anything because they were anonymous. There was a lot of anonymity behind the keyboard.
Sure.
But now people don't care about pissing off another person, because if you're on the internet and you're on YouTube, it's just you are. But when you have something like that where it's like, a broadcasting, they're the ones calling the shots. Like, yeah, I could see that, forcing you to use your real name. But you see that shit on Facebook now. Like, people on Facebook using their real names saying the most heinous shit.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're like, well,
You find out which one of your uncles is racist.
yeah, really quick.
All right. Tell your racist uncle about the show.
Or don't.
Well, I think we've talked enough about where we're all from. A90skid.com, Super
Yeah.
Gamecast 64. Thanks,
Yep.
everybody. And bye for now.
Bye.